Ever since I've played the Sands of Time as a kid, the Ubisoft Prince of Persia games have always been among my personal favorite games of all time. Therefore, I'd love to review all the games from the Sands of Time universe, starting with the first game from 2003, working up to the Forgotten Sands from 2010. So this month my channel will be all about Prince of Persia. I'll give a quick spoiler warning since I'll talk about the stories in great detail. The plot is about a prince obtaining a dagger that allows him to control time. An evil man, simply known as the Vizier, convinces the prince to use this dagger to release the sands of time from the hourglass. This turns all the people of the kingdom into sand monsters. Some people survive, including the prince himself, the Vizier, and a woman called Farah, who teams up with the prince. Through platforming, sword fighting, and solving puzzles, the prince and Farah have to find a way to stop the Vizier and undo the harm brought to the kingdom. Even though the Sands of Time doesn't hold up as well as I remember, it's still a great game I had a lot of fun with. Prince of Persia is a perfect combination of platforming, fighting, puzzles, looking for secrets, and narrative. All these elements are balanced and give the game variety until the end. Growing up with Prince of Persia, it gave my love for these type of games life. Nowadays, I don't care for online games or big 100-hour open-world games. I care most for linear, to-the-point platform games, action games with puzzle elements and a good story. That's the type of games I grew up with and the type of games I find myself the most interested in still. The plot, for an action game from back in 2003, is very enjoyable, and to this day, the characters and dialogue still hold up. Especially the conversations between the prince and Farah made me laugh. The prince is a very cynical character who bitches about almost everything he sees, yet he is made likable enough to take him seriously during the more dramatic parts of the plot. During the trip, the prince starts to bond with Farah, and after a while you truly understand the bond these two have, making some of the more dramatic parts later on all the more effective. It ends up with the prince using the hourglass to rewind time so much that it saves everyone, but also undoes the bond he and Farah made, making them total strangers. It's a clever way to end the game, and it doesn't shy away of adding some humor at the end.
I said I owe you thanks. You presume too much. Such a fantastic story.
I've played the HD remaster of the game, and even though the characters are a bit blocky, the game still looks impressive. The game has this Arabian fairy tale setting, pretty colors, gorgeous Arabian architecture, and I especially like how the sun shines through the buildings. It gives the game a dreamy atmosphere. The Arabian music perfectly fits the setting, and it always fits the mood of the story. Whether it's intense music during the fighting sequences, silence during platform parts, relaxing music during more peaceful moments, or an enjoyable end song at the credits, the music is done right. I did, however, encounter some sound glitches with the HD remaster. There are a couple of parts where objects don't have a sound effect, and there's even an important cutscene later on in the game where the sound doesn't match the footage.
Farah, no!
Because this happens in one of the most important cutscenes, this is a big miss. The most iconic gameplay feature of Prince of Persia is the fact that you can rewind time. If you make a mistake, causing the prince to die or lose a lot of health, you can undo your mistake by rewinding time. There is a limited amount of times you can use the rewind based on the amount of sand you hold, and there is a limit as to how far you can rewind time. Refilling your sand is done by killing enemies, but I'll talk more about that later. It may sound like the rewind button makes the game too easy, but the entire game is built around this mechanic. There are multiple traps or other parts in the game where making the slightest mistake means death, often resulting in doing a long part all over again if you don't reverse time. Because of this penalty, you make sure to use your rewind button as wisely as possible rather than just spamming it. Sands of Time is the easiest in the series, but since it's also the first, I'ma let this one slide. The other most iconic aspects of the Prince of Persia games are the free-running platforming sections. Nowadays, we see many climbers in video games, but to me the one and only climber will always be the prince. For one simple reason, in this game, climbing is truly a challenging and fun gameplay mechanic. Here, climbing is more stepwise and slower paced. carefully timing your movements and testing your reflexes once you're in the heat of all the traps. The game always manages to add something new to the obstacles, so it doesn't feel like you're doing the same parts over and over again. This makes platforming in Prince of Persia an almost addictingly fun gameplay aspect. The puzzles I wouldn't call hard by any means, but they're fun distractions to give the gameplay some variety. The fighting system is one of those aspects I have mixed feelings about, and this is where the greatest weakness of Sands of Time lies. There are different enemies that require different approaches. You have multiple nifty moves to use against them, like jumping on top of them or using walls to jump over them, and there are multiple good magic powers to use against large hordes of enemies. That's all quite enjoyable. Unfortunately, you have to suck each enemy into your dagger to kill them. This means that, with the exception of one enemy, you can kill every single enemy in the game with one hit. With most enemies, you can just jump over them and instantly suck them into your dagger, meaning most of these fights consist of spamming this one attack over and over again. It is made harder when you're surrounded by multiple enemies, making wrongly timing this move very punishable. But in most cases, spamming this move is the best way out. I wish the game had more enemies that you can't one-hit KO, or multiple parts where there are no walls to jump onto to make the fighting more challenging, you know? Next to those one-hitters, there are a couple of enemies like the birds, the bats, and the scarabs that aren't fun to fight against because they either consist of mindlessly spamming the attack button or standing still while waiting for them to strike and then counter. These enemies are repetitive and not satisfying. But like I said, I don't dislike the fighting system because it is given enough juice to be enjoyable, but it's easily the weakest part of the game. As a first in the series, Sands of Time has lots to offer, and I still love to replay the game every once in a while. A solid plot with likable characters, great music, and timeless graphics. The slower-paced platforming creates a more challenging and overall more fun experience than most climbing games in modern 3D platformers. But the fighting system, even though it gives you plenty of different moves and enemies, isn't that good due to the repetitive nature and some annoying enemies. The final boss is hands down one of the most disappointingly easy bosses I've ever faced, something the sequels definitely improved on. With a good first entry in the series, Ubisoft decided to shake things up for the sequel. But just how much did they shake things up? See for yourself in the next review, which will be on Warrior Within.